My name is Naomi Tanaka, and for most of my life, I was the family embarrassment. At least, that's what they told me. Sometimes with silence, sometimes with thinly veiled jabs hidden behind wine glasses and forced smiles. Every year, like clockwork, our extended family would gather in Tokyo for the Sakura season banquet. It was supposed to be a time of beauty and tradition. For me, it was an annual reminder that I had fallen short of expectations I never agreed to in the first place. Kenji, my cousin, was always the star of those nights. He had the tailored suits, the executive title, the condo in Aoyama, and that smug, effortless charm that made the aunties swoon and the uncles nod with approval. Every accomplishment of his, no matter how trivial, was celebrated like it was, Nobel-worthy. Meanwhile, I'd barely sit down before someone asked if I was still figuring things out, or working on that little app thing. My mother once introduced me to a friend as the artistic one, with a tight smile that screamed embarrassment. My father avoided talking about my career altogether, if you could call their assumption of failure a career. The worst part wasn't the pity. It was the disbelief. The idea that someone like me, quiet, not flashy, not hungry for praise, could ever be more than just background noise to their loud, curated successes. At one banquet, Kenji toasted to those who carry the family legacy, and everyone turned to him as if he were royalty. He met my eyes and smirked, like he was daring me to speak up, to prove I belonged. I didn't. Not in their eyes. To them, I lived in a shoebox apartment, did odd tech jobs online, and sipped green tea like I couldn't afford wine. The truth was, I could have bought every bottle on that table. But what would be the point? They never saw me anyway. It's funny how family can build you up with expectations, only to tear you down when you refuse to meet them on their terms. They didn't just misunderstand me, they dismissed me. And over time, I stopped trying to correct them. I let them believe whatever they wanted. Because while they were busy clapping for Kenji's rehearsed greatness, I was busy building something. Real, and the best part? They never saw it coming. I didn't storm out of that banquet. I didn't cry in a bathroom stall or throw a wine glass like some movie heroine. I just smiled, folded my napkin, and let them believe I was still small. Because something shifted in me that night. Not in a loud, fiery way, but in the kind of way that settles deep and cold. I realized I had spent too long waiting for applause from people who never planned to clap. And worse, I had been measuring my worth by a scoreboard I didn't even agree to play on. That night, walking back through the neon-lit streets of Tokyo, past strangers who didn't know or care who I was, I felt something rare. Relief. It hit me that I didn't owe anyone an explanation for not fitting into the box they built for me. I didn't need their approval. What I needed, what I had been starving for, was alignment. A life that made sense to me. Work that felt like mine. Success that didn't come at the price of pretending to be someone else. I went home to my so-called cramped apartment, the one they pitied me for, and looked around. Small? Maybe, but every inch of it was mine. My ideas, my vision, my space. No trust fund, no shortcuts, no borrowed clout, just grit. And as I sat there with a cup of instant ramen and my laptop balanced on a pillow, I decided something important. I was going to build quietly, build relentlessly, and build something so solid that no one could dismiss it. Not even if they tried. And no, it wasn't about proving them wrong. Not really. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need their map to get where I was going. I could chart my own. I started saying no more often. I stopped entertaining half-hearted advice from people who'd never dared to build anything of their own. I spent nights coding, researching, pitching, failing, then starting again. And slowly, I felt my center shift. Not toward revenge, but toward self-respect, toward clarity. They called me lost. But the truth is, I had just stopped looking for their path, because I had found mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't ashamed of where I stood. Don't remember the exact moment Miratech was born, not the official one with lawyers and paperwork, but the real moment. The one that lives somewhere between 100 rejections and one hard-earned yes. Maybe it was during a midnight coding session at a shared co-working space that reeked of stale coffee. Maybe it was the first time a seed investor laughed in my face and told me to find a male co-founder. Or maybe it was when I saw Kenji on a magazine cover, holding a plaque for Innovator of the Year, and realized half the work he was credited for had been outsourced to underpaid consultants like me. That's when the fire really started. To burn. I didn't rage. I planned. While my family thought I was bouncing between freelance gigs, I was laying brick after brick of something no one could see coming. Miratech began as a shell company, intentionally invisible. Registered under an obscure LLC name, fronted by a discreet legal team in Singapore, backed quietly by micro-investments from angel funds that didn't care what gender the founder was as long as the numbers lined up. I made sure they did. Every single month, I didn't put my name on anything public. I kept a low profile on purpose. While Kenji hosted flashy product launches and gave interviews about market disruption, I was buying pieces of the infrastructure his company relied on. Not directly, of course. That would have drawn attention. Instead, I built a web. One subsidiary buying a logistics firm here, another investing in a software vendor there. Always under different names. Always quiet. I wasn't building a brand. I was building leverage. And then, about a year in, the opportunity showed up like fate disguised in a boring PDF. Isuzu Systems was looking for a strategic partnership after a series of weak quarters. I didn't even blink. I just called. My general counsel. "We're going in," I said. From there, it was a long game. Every acquisition was structured through proxy firms, every signature filtered through legal firewalls. Kenji's name appeared in my inbox more than once. He had no idea the minor software bugs he was escalating internally were being patched by engineers on my payroll. Ironic, really. The golden boy unknowingly leaning on the ghost of the cousin. He pitied. By the time the final acquisition contract landed on my desk, marked confidential, signed by Isuzu's board, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm, steady, like a storm that had been brewing for years and was finally coming to shore. I was done playing the game by their rules. Kenji thought he was preparing for a merger. What he didn't know was that the CEO he was scheduled to meet at 9 a.m. wasn't some faceless executive in a skyscraper. It was me, the so-called failure, the family disgrace. And the next morning, he'd be walking straight into my boardroom. The night before the deal closed, I found myself sitting at that long rooftop dining table again. Polished mahogany, panoramic skyline, and the same cold stares dressed up in designer smiles. It was the annual Sakura banquet, where my family gathered to pretend they were closer than they really were. And as usual, the spotlight belonged to Kenji. He strolled in late, cologne thick enough to choke subtlety, and launched into his latest success story before the appetizers even hit the table. "So," he said, swirling his wine like a Bond villain in a tailored suit. "After my pitch last quarter, the CEO pulled me aside and offered me East Asia Regional Director, youngest in company history." Cheers erupted. Aunt Yuki dabbed her eyes. With a napkin. Uncle Hiroshi clapped him on the back like he'd just saved the empire. I sipped my tea, expression neutral, wondering if he'd even read the contract he'd signed last week. Probably not. Then, because Kenji always had to play the benevolent prince, he leaned toward me with that patronizing glint in his eye. "Naomi?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you're still trying to find your path, I might be able to squeeze you onto my team. Admin work maybe, junior analyst, something manageable." I didn't flinch, didn't roll my eyes, just smiled, politely. That's very kind of you, I said. Inside, I wanted to laugh. The company he was bragging about? Mine by morning. The position he was offering? Already obsolete. Then Aunt Yuki chimed in with her usual helpful suggestions. Naomi, I know a friend with a small print shop. Maybe you could help out with orders? Something flexible? I nodded, sliding my untouched dessert aside and said, I'll think about it. I wasn't there to fight. I was there to observe. Let them write the final chapter of a story they never bothered to understand, just before I tore it up. That's when the butler stepped in, interrupting the room like a needle across a record. He looked right at me, bowed, and said with crisp formality, Welcome back, Miss Tanaka. The board is waiting for you upstairs. Silence dropped like a guillotine. The room froze. My chopsticks hovered midair. Kenji's smirk twitched. Aunt Yuki blinked like her contacts had betrayed her. My father set his glass down so slowly it sounded like thunder in the hush. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and offered a simple nod. If you'll excuse me. No grand speech, no dramatic reveal, just facts walking out the door in heels they never saw coming. Because I didn't need their permission to be powerful. I just needed them to see it. Too late to stop it. I didn't look back when I left that dinner. I didn't need to. Their silence was louder than any insult they'd ever tossed my way. As I stepped into the elevator that led to the boardroom upstairs, my boardroom, something settled in my chest. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even pride. It was clarity. The kind that only comes when you finally stop shrinking to fit inside someone else's version of your life. When the elevator doors closed, the noise from the banquet faded, replaced by a steady hum and the soft glow of the panel lighting up. 54. 55. 56. The top floor. My floor. The place they all assumed belonged to someone more qualified, more appropriate, more like Kenji. But it didn't. It belonged to me. The girl they thought was stuck in neutral, now running a company that spanned 4 continents, employing over 10,000 people, and sitting on top of the largest private tech valuation in the region. My office wasn't flashy, but it was deliberate. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling glass, a quiet view of the Tokyo skyline like circuitry stitched across the horizon. There was no nameplate on the door, no portrait on the wall, just a sleek brass logo. Miratech. That was enough. I never wanted to be famous. I wanted to build something unshakable. From that office, I had signed deals with logistics partners in Berlin, secured AI research contracts in Tel Aviv, and partnered with healthcare startups in São Paulo. I knew every line of code in our original prototype. I knew where every dollar was allocated in our R&D budget, and I knew that the same cousin who offered me an admin job couldn't make it through 1 week of my schedule without crying in a restroom stall. Funny how success looks different when no one sees it coming. To my family, I still lived in a cramped apartment. They didn't know the studio they pitied me for was the penthouse at Ami Residences, with a private elevator, a glass wine wall, and a rooftop view of Shibuya that made the city look like a painting. They didn't know my car was a matte black Lexus parked underground, paid in full the day I closed the acquisition stake in ISU Systems. And honestly, I didn't care if they ever knew, because I wasn't building this for their attention. I wasn't collecting milestones like social currency for group chats and holiday updates. I was building an empire on my own terms, with my own scars, my own late nights, my own blueprint. That was my resurrection. They thought I was lost, but I wasn't lost. I was becoming. The next morning, I stood in front of the massive windows of my 56th floor office, watching the first light of Tokyo spill across the skyline. Below, the city pulsed like a living circuit board. Behind me, my assistant Hana moved quietly through final prep. Folders, seating chart, executive profiles, all in place. Security had cleared the building an hour ago. Phones were returned. to attendees. Every word spoken from this point forward would be recorded, time-stamped, archived, and right on cue, Kenji arrived early. Of course he did. He always had to be the first in the room, the first to speak, the first to be noticed. I heard his voice echo through the hallway as I walked toward the boardroom. Loud, confident, dripping with certainty. Once the merger is finalized, I expect to oversee all Asia-Pacific accounts, he was saying to the executives. Wouldn't be surprised if Miratech offered me a board seat. I opened the door. Silence fell instantly. Kenji turned mid-sentence, that signature smirk ready to charm, until his eyes met mine. For a second, his brain couldn't compute. Naomi? He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. What are you doing here? I didn't answer. I walked past him, calm and deliberate, placed my briefcase at the head of the table, and turned to address the room. Good morning, everyone, I said. Apologies for the delay. Hana moved behind me, distributing the acquisition folders like clockwork. Across the glossy table, senior executives began flipping pages, their eyes widening. Logos, charts, legal seals, terms of control. Final. Signatures. The mood shifted from curiosity to realization, and then to awe. Kenji stiffened. This is some mistake, he snapped. We're here to meet with the CEO of Miratech. You are, I said, opening my folder. I'm Naomi Tanaka, founder and CEO. The silence after that was exquisite. Kenji looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. You've been freelancing from a cafe. That was a smokescreen, I replied, tone level. Just like the studio apartment you mocked. That building? Miratech owns it. He was unraveling. Fast now. You let me stand there last night, bragging, offering you a job. Yes, I said, looking him straight in the eye. While you were performing success, I was building it. Then I turned to the executives. Effective 9 a.m. today, Izuzu Systems is now a full subsidiary of Miratech. Executive leadership will be undergoing immediate review. Kenji stood, chair screeching. You can't do this. I'm the regional director. Your position, I said evenly, is being dissolved. What followed was a blur. Signatures, acknowledgements, nods of reluctant respect. Some executives left pale-faced, some shook my hand, but none looked at Kenji. When the room finally emptied, only he remained, staring blankly out at the skyline, like he'd been watching a dream decay in real time. Why didn't you ever tell me? He asked. Because, I said, snapping my briefcase shut, I needed to know I could do it without you. It didn't take long, less than 20 minutes. After the boardroom emptied, my phone lit up with the word Mom. I knew she'd seen the news. It was everywhere. Industry outlets, business blogs, even morning TV. Tech CEO Naomi Tanaka stuns with hostile takeover of Izuzu Systems. I picked up on speaker. Her voice came through tight, brittle. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been hiding this from us all these years. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend. I simply said, I never hid anything. You just never asked the right questions. She went quiet. Then softly, but we tried to help. You. I smiled, not cruelly, just sadly. I didn't need help. I needed space to become who I am. The next family gathering was different. No more backhanded comments, no more side eyes over chopsticks. This time, they leaned in when I spoke. They listened. Even Aunt Yuki offered me tea with 2 hands like I was royalty. And Kenji, he didn't come. Word was, he'd taken a consulting role at a mid-tier firm out in Osaka. Not disgraced, just quieter now. Humbled. But here's the thing. I didn't need their respect. I had already stopped needing it long ago. The real shift wasn't in how they saw me, it was in how I saw myself. I didn't win because I crushed anyone. I won because I grew, because I stopped explaining and started building, because I walked my path, even when they told me I was lost. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes it's built in silence, brick by brick until it's too solid to be ignored. That was my revenge. Not a mic drop, just presence. So if you've ever been underestimated, written off, or laughed at for dreaming too big or too differently, I see you. You're not alone. And your story's not over. If this resonated with you, drop a comment and tell me about your moment when they didn't see you coming. I read every single one. And hey, if you're building something in silence too, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around, because the best stories, they start in the shadows, but they end with the world finally listening.